Hello, welcome everyone from the Eden Project, Festival of Discovery. My name is Alejandra Arias. I'm the Communications Director at Force of Nature, and I'm joined today by my colleague, Sasha Wright. She's our Research Coordinator, and we're both incredibly excited to be here. We love everything that the Eden Project does and the Festival of Discovery, so really honored to be with you here today. The topic of today's session, as you might have already guessed, is our Eco-Anxiety to Agency workshop. And today we'll really be taking you through how to build resilience as the climate generation. And before we really dive straight into it, I want to begin our class today in the way that we begin every classroom, which is having a group check-in. So I know that you're watching this recording now, but I'd like you to just take a pause. You can even pause the recording if that feels good to you, and just ask yourself, how are you feeling today? And in particularly, how are you feeling about the climate crisis today? Thank you for taking that time for yourself just now. And Sasha is going to share a little bit about Force of Nature, just to give you a background and some context into the work that we're doing, and how we are creating change in the world before we dive straight into the practice.
Thank you, Alejandra, and thank you to everybody who showed up for themselves today to do a check-in with how they are feeling in the face of the world's messiest problems. It's incredibly important to start by showing up with vulnerability, showing up with love, ready to receive some learning about how the climate crisis is making us feel. So we are a youth nonprofit called Force of Nature, mobilizing mindsets for climate action. What does that actually mean? So we work in classrooms and boardrooms alike, empowering young people to shift from a place of anxiety to a place of agency, empowering them to walk the corridors of power, and in doing so, changing institutional mindsets. Through our programs, we cultivate individual agency, the tools on how to create change, and communities at scale. We support leaders across business, education, and policy to center young people in delivering intergenerational climate solutions. Critically, what this all means is that we bring emotion into unconventional spaces. So we ask people to show up with a humanity, to face up to the problems, and in doing so, help them cultivate tools and resilience to see strength in those difficult and messy emotions. So underpinning all of that work is comprehensive research into climate psychology and eco-anxiety, which is the theme of today's session. Working with a diversity of people, we've learned that no matter our age, our background, or our experience, the climate crisis leaves most of us wondering, what can I do? And it leaves us feeling a smoothie of emotions. So I'll pass it over to Alejandra to talk a little bit about why we created this session.
Thank you, Sasha. So I'll be introducing today's session, and it really is focusing on you and how young people around the world want to make a difference, but we don't know where or how to start. Many of us might feel powerless to create meaningful change, and in that, we're seeing an explosion of mental health difficulties, fear towards the future that we're inheriting, uncertainty around our role in changing it, and a loss of faith in our world leaders. But what if there was an opportunity to support young people in stepping up rather than shutting down? So today, what we're doing is covering those practical methods of taking eco-anxiety into agency. As you can see from the next slide, and if you turn on the news or if you go on social media, you know that the climate crisis is upon us. Our generation has inherited this challenge, and it is fueling a mental health epidemic. But we've realized at Force of Nature that the threat, even greater than the climate crisis, is how powerless we can feel in the face of it.
When we start to examine the parallel between the climate crisis and between this mental health epidemic that we are seeing, we start to see that the climate crisis is a symptom of broken systems. It's a symptom of the relationships we have to ourselves, to one another, and to our planet. So, a survey from Friends of the Earth showed that 70% of young people in the UK, ages 18 to 24, felt this eco-anxiety. And at Force of Nature, we undertook our own research, and we found the same on a global scale, surveying and speaking to young people in over 50 countries. 70% of them saying that they felt climate change negatively contributed to their mental health, 70% felt hopeless in the face of climate change, and only 26% said they knew how to meaningfully contribute to solving the climate crisis. We know at Force of Nature that this stems from two core beliefs based on our conversations. The first is I am too small to make a difference. And the second is the system is too broken to create meaningful change. These are beliefs that we hold that are incredibly destructive to both our own mental health and also to our ability to show up in a way where our mindset can affect meaningful change for ourselves, for our planet, and for one another.
So before going any further, we're going to do some eco-anxiety myth busting. And Sasha has already alluded to some of that. We're going to be challenging the biggest misconceptions that we've heard. The first misunderstanding is the narrow view that eco-anxiety stems only from the climate crisis, when we know that eco-anxiety largely stems from the inaction in the face of it, when we lose faith in our world leaders and in the institutions that we trust. Eco-anxiety also stems from a lack of self-efficacy, of not having confidence to take action in those feelings. And we can see that illuminated in the two stories that Sasha highlighted. I'm too small to make a difference, and the system is too broken to change. The second misconceptions that you see in the slide here is that we should try to fix eco-anxiety. Eco-anxiety is a healthy response, and it shows you that you are awake to the world issues. Every climate psychologist we've spoken to has said that the problem isn't the inedible feelings of eco-anxiety, but rather when they turn into a paralysis and we don't couple those feelings of anxiety, stress, and anger with agency, community, and vision.
So at Force of Nature, we distinguish between eco-anxiety as being the feelings that wake us up, whatever they may be. We try not to label them as positive or negative, so that can be hope, despair, urgency, grief. But that distinguished from ecophobia, which is shutting down in the face of those feelings. So we've identified that ecophobia, or the feeling of powerlessness specifically, actually stems from three key places, three buckets. The first is human psychology, or how we're wired from an evolutionary perspective. It's hard for those of us not yet experiencing the impacts of the climate crisis to compute it as an immediate threat because it's still so large and nebulous. And while we might be good at responding to problems in our immediate community, this doesn't always translate to the global level until it's right in front of our faces. We often use the analogy of the frog in the slowly warming pot of water. When she enters the water, it's cool, but she doesn't realize she's swimming above a flame. And by the time the water is boiling, it's a bit too late. The second is cultural narratives, which are the stories that are impressed upon us by society and culture. This is going to be different for all of us based on our upbringing, based on our context. You might be able to think of some of them today, but for some of us, the easiest way to group these stories is around our values, or what we're taught is important. So extrinsic values and intrinsic values. It's not our fault that these are taught to us, but just like we learned them in the first place, it is possible to unlearn or relearn other narratives that are more community-based and that can actually help us face up to what's happening. The third and final reason we will explore today, and the theme that we explore the most at Force of Nature, is our self-limiting beliefs. These beliefs, or our inner critic, can limit our potential by negatively reinforcing the change that we believe ourselves to be capable of. And specifically, we all hold these core destructive beliefs that keep us from fulfilling that change-making potential. We know that in order to affect change outside, we need to start with change in here. So there are stories like, I am too powerless to make change, I'm not doing enough, I'm not the right person to do this, the problem is too large, I will speak out, and I will be isolated if I do so. It's important to take this first step to recognize those feelings so that we can critically figure out how to hold them with great care and channel them into feelings of action.
So you might be asking yourself now, how do I channel those feelings of anxiety into agency rather than being overwhelmed by them? So I'm going to be sharing, as you can see on the slide here, the 4 core principles that underpin all of the interventions that we deliver at Force of Nature, including our anxiety to agency classrooms, which are 90-minute workshops that have been co-created with young people and climate psychology experts. The first one is talk about your feelings and connect to them through community or through other people who also feel the same. Try not to judge the feelings that arise, but instead create space for them and know that your emotions are the catalyst to action. The second one is creating space for vision, focusing not only what we're reacting against, but what we're working for. In our anxiety to agency classrooms, we include a visualization to imagine a world where we've solved the climate crisis. Many students say that this is actually the first time they've ever given themselves a license to imagine an alternative future.
The third principle is finding focus. So often our eco-anxiety stems from a feeling of overwhelm, fueled by the sense that we need to solve all the problems or we can solve none of them. Our impact, our agency, our well-being comes from an ability to focus on a problem we want to solve, one that ignites that fire within our bellies that feels really nourishing to step up and address, and focus on the unique skills we have to show up and solve this problem. The last one is to examine your own self-limiting stories. What's going on in your mind and your heart? These are impressed upon us from a very early age, and they can limit our ability to create change unless we become aware of them. Reflecting on a time that you wanted to take action, but you didn't, consider which story got in your way. Was it that you didn't feel smart enough to solve the problem, that it was too big to solve, that it wasn't your responsibility, that you were scared? And make a conscious decision of which stories we want to subscribe to, which fuel our agency and our vision, versus those that cause us to shut down and tip towards ecophobia.
So we wanted to share a little bit today of a campaign that we've been running alongside COP26. The campaign's name is called Call Your Mother. This campaign is part of a larger interface where we've built a digital portal where people can share their feelings about the climate crisis. If you scan the QR code that you see here, you'll be able to join the conversation with thousands of other people who showed up in Glasgow to send their message to Mother Earth and also send a message to people in power. The campaign was continuing to run, so please go to the website, as you can see on the slide here, callyourmother.earth. In it, you'll be able to see everything that the campaign is about, which is a space to open up and share your emotions about the climate crisis and join the conversation with like-minded people and individuals who might feel very similarly to you. When you go towards the top, you'll be able to see that you have 3 options: having a check-in, sending a message to those in power, or having a good old rant. So when you click on any of those choices, you'll be asked to fill in your details. It only takes about 10 seconds, but after you do that, you'll be able to share your story with us and be a part of the bigger tapestry of voices around the world who are ready to sort of step up, share their emotions, and turn those feelings into agency, not just at COP26, but even beyond COP. So, Sasha, would you like to say any final remarks or words?
My final call to action today is to check in with yourself and with a loved one. I think so often that we forget that if we want to be able to show up, if we want to be able to address some of the problems that we see in the world, we can't pour from an empty cup. So, however, you need to show up for yourself and for those around you to make sure that your cup is filled today. I guarantee it will help with your eco anxiety. It'll help you show up with more love and attention than otherwise. So check in with yourself. It might take a difficult conversation with yourself to ask those hard questions about what self-limiting beliefs might be in your own mind. Check in with your loved ones and take care.
Well, amazing. Thank you so much, everyone at the Eden Project, at the Festival of Discovery, anyone who's watching this recording. We so appreciate your time, your energy, and the space that you've given to yourself and each other. We're all connected, even if we're watching this individually. But it's been a pleasure and an honor, so thank you.